Okay, so welcome to the monthly book club chat, and this month the book is Becoming the Narcissist's Nightmare: How to Devalue and Discard the Narcissist While Supplying Yourself by Shahida Arabi. I probably am not saying that name correctly, but so I apologize. So let me get over to YouTube and see if anybody is even here yet. They might not be. This was kind of a last minute thrown together book club. Let's see. What is today? The 31st. And that date's not right. Okay, there's a few people. Kevin says, oh, this is the book club. Yes, this is a test run of how we're trying to do it. And so, oh, what's going on? Hold on just a second here. Why? Oh my gosh, why is it doing this? Now my Zoom is wanting me to update my account. No, not now. So, okay, let's see. Sorry, folks, trying to get this figured out. Okay, yeah, lots of people hopping on. So, okay. Dora says, hi Dana, I'm at work, but here I am. Glad you could sneak away and join our book club chat. So and Awesome Christina says, yay, it's the book club. I loved this book so much. Fantastic. So welcome everybody. And we're doing something a little different. We're going to be moving the book club. I'm going to be doing it through Zoom. And this was kind of a last minute thing. I had a meeting with a Zoom person yesterday, and this is all new for me, so we're just going to try it a little bit at a time. So hopefully by the book club next month it'll go a lot smoother than right now. So we can, but yeah, so we're just going to make it work tonight and go from there. So, and you guys can't see the chat, but you should be able to hear it. So let's see. It's me and a gal named Lucy. And Lucy is the one that came up with the book club questions for this month, which are on my website. If you go to Thrive After Abuse and go to book club, then you can see the book club discussions, and they are fantastic. So I'll be reading them aloud this time, but in the future for next month, if you want to go and get a copy of the questions so you can go through them, that's where they'll be. So, and I'll put a lot. I also added a calendar of events to my site, so you can see the different books that we're reading and like the different dates and times that things are going to be happening. So this is an attempt to get organized. So, has anybody? Looks like there's a few people that have read the book. So Lucy and I are going to hop in on the questions, and if you want to chime in with your answers, go ahead and put them in the chat down below, and we'll go from there. Okay? Okay. So let me see. I'm going to mute you real quick here, Lucy. And then I'm going to unmute you. All right, there we go. So, first question is, narcissists and sociopaths are aware of their actions and the impact of their actions. We know this not only from the voices of narcissists and sociopaths themselves, but also in the way they smear their victims and the various methods they use to escape accountability, such as gaslighting and projection. You cannot plot to blame someone else for your actions if you are not aware of your own blame and are attempting to escape exposure. You also cannot switch your mask rapidly from the true self to a false self when there is a witness to your behavior. It is not under your conscious control. How does this statement make you feel? Does it help wipe away some of the cobwebs and doubts that you had about yourself? So let me unmute you here, Lucy. So what was your take on that?
I had a specific example with my father. I remember when I was going through struggling with whether to go no contact for good, that I would literally cry, wishing that he could learn how to treat me like a stranger, because I knew he was capable. I knew he could do it. I knew if he could fake it. And I was so willing to settle for anything to be able to continue the relationship. I would have been happy enough if he just treated me like a stranger, because he was at least polite to them. You know, he knew how to pull that charm and that mask on, and he couldn't do it. He could not do it, and so I had to go. But that's what that particular part of the book made me think about, is how I agonized over that so much, wanting that, just treat me like a stranger, please. I remember going through that, and that's how it became clear to me that there is control there. They can turn it on and off when they want to.
Yeah. And oh wait, there's feedback here. Let me mute the audio here. Okay, I think that's better. Yes, and I liked what you said. You said, can you see how trying to pin down this behavior is like trying to pick up mercury from a broken thermometer? That there will always be an excuse for their problematic behavior, or it will always be somebody else's fault. And that they will always squirm and wiggle and evade open, honest communication, and that you will always be left feeling resentful with unfinished business between the two of you, or else you will be handed the responsibility. Does this help clarify how no contact will solve the problem? And to me, that was so profound, because yes, when you really realize that it's not you, that a person can't, there's not enough eggshells that we can walk on. There's nothing that we can do we can't change our behavior enough to change them, because their behavior is not a response to our behavior. Their behavior is a reflection of what's going on inside of them.
Right.
And once we realize this is what it is, this is who they are, they're not going to change, and all we can do is just distance ourselves to a place where we can keep ourselves safe and sane from this. So, yeah, for me, I think the truly realizing that that duality that exists in narcissistic people, that a lot of the validation for sure has come from reading books from other people and hearing snippets of their story and in support groups. Because if a person, oh my gosh, when you're dealing with this alone and you think, it's understandable that you're like, well, it must be me, right? Like, most relationships can be worked on, this can be saved, I just got to figure out a way to get through to them. But then hearing other people that have been maybe even in relationships for longer, it really makes it clear like what can be worked on and like just what's really going on. Like you've got two different selves there within one person.
I agree.
Yeah. So that was a really great point. Okay, second question is, you said here, I believe there is also a difference between an addict who has become dependent on his or her addiction and a narcissistic abuser who uses alcohol and or other substances as a means to abuse and escape accountability. This means that their substance use is comorbid and coexists with their narcissism. Many survivors meet narcissistic partners who used alcohol or drugs as an excuse to engage in verbal and psychological, I would also say emotional and physical, or even sexual abuse. What's important to remember is that there are many people who abuse alcohol or other drugs, but who do not abuse others when they do. Those who abuse alcohol and abuse others are often the ones who are using their addiction as an excuse to hurt others without having to be held accountable for the abuse they dish out while under the influence. Does anyone know of a narcissist who abused a substance and then blamed their behavior on the substance? Can you see how this is a cop-out and another example of failing to take responsibility for one's own actions? Yes. What's your experience been with that?
Well, I had a roommate that was drank a fifth a night, which is an astounding amount of alcohol for a little woman to put away every single evening. And she would do horrible things, just trip and fall and break things and sit on my dogs. And I also, she would give what I called the monologue from hell, where the room got emptied of air. She sucked the air out of the room with just going on and on and on, meaningless stories that you didn't know anybody she was talking about. And then the next day, she would get up, and I would always start out, "What do you remember about last night?" Nothing. And it was horrible. And then it also reminds me of, I don't know if you ever heard of the happy drunk and the mean drunk. But it also made me think about that, how sometimes alcohol can emphasize people's personalities. And if they have a tendency to be mean in the first place, it might get a lot meaner, and that mask slips easier. So there's a lot to be said about that.
Yes, I agree completely. Oh, so let me mute you. There's a lot of feedback whenever I start talking, and there we go. I don't know why that is. Yeah, I think, people can blame their abusive behavior on any number of things. It's sort of like if a person all of a sudden gets a lot of money or gets a lot of power or kind of whatever, people say, oh, well, this has really changed them, and it's like, well, no, it's just made them more of what they already are. And it's the same thing, I think, with like you were saying with substance use, is if a person's already abusive, or if they're already, doing squirrely behavior and cheating and all these kinds of things, or being financially irresponsible, or if they're already emotionally or verbally or however abusive, that substance use just exacerbates it. And I think a lot of people can get stuck in that, where they want to blame the substances for what they're experiencing, and then they might feel kind of stuck in this like guilt or shame or pity of, well, I can't hold this person accountable because they're an alcoholic, or I can't hold them accountable because they're an addict. And it's like, no, substances aren't going to make a person abusive. Abuse is about power and control. It's not about how under the influence a person is. And I think that's important for us to realize to separate the two. Because like you said in the question, there's lots of people out there that have substance abuse problems that are not abusive. So it's not the substances that are the problem.
All right. How about on the live stream? I can't see that, but maybe some other people are chiming in with their thoughts about the questions.
Okay, yeah, let me hop over and see. Oops, okay, I'm gonna mute you again. I don't know why that is doing that. Yeah, Helene says her ex's narcissistic rage came out much more when he drank, which was nightly. Yes. Yes, and Victoria says it wasn't easy for her to leave her ex, but she started to feel better almost immediately. No more eggshells she had to walk on. Completely. It is, it's so nice. It can be so difficult to leave, but there is that sense of peace of, I don't have to worry. I don't have to worry anymore about disagreeing with this person or what I'm going to say or what I'm not going to say, or I don't have to get criticized all the time. I don't have to get yelled at. I don't have to get put down. You just don't, we're worried if are they lying to me? Are they cheating on me? Like what, right? Like now what are they up to? It's just this sense of peace in a person's life, and it's very nice. Let's see. Al-Kuda Babe says, I read over the internet that a bloke was talking about narcissism, and basically they know their behavior is abusive and manipulative, and the more you stay with them, the more they think you're an idiot. Yes. We are targets of, they are emotional con artists, and we are their targets. And it's so hard for a person to actually fully realize that there is not love there. Like, love doesn't hurt. People that love each other don't treat each other that way. And, if a person's mistreating you, then there's something that's really off there. And it's a problem. And that they're enjoying this. There is no love without respect, basically. So good comment. Okay, so interesting. Michaela says, my mother would always attack and abuse all of her children when she was drunk. And her response when we would try to talk to her about it was always that she didn't remember. There were no apologies. Yes. And that's that lack of accountability of, well, you can't blame me. I was somehow under the influence. And there's this saying that one of the most common phrases for an abusive person is, oh, well, look at what you made me do. And that just kind of shows that lack of accountability on their end. And that comes out, that phrase, look at what you made me do, can also be used for other people and substances. Sort of like, well, look at what the alcohol made me do, right? Or look at what the drugs made me do. It's still that lack of accountability of, nope, I did this, right? Like they did this. Being 100% accountable and responsible for their behavior and not putting it off onto other people or other things. So, okay, I'm going to read the next question here. I got a new microphone, so I'm hoping that it's better than the old microphone. We'll see. Let's see. Next question. Many trauma survivors were afraid to become abusers themselves and were extremely careful about their behavior. They would often reach out, scared that their abusers had rubbed off on them, when in reality they were coming into terms with their legitimate anger that they felt at the injustice of their abusers, and consciously made efforts to be self-aware of any maladaptive behaviors. Can you begin to feel how your anger is justified? and how anger is a signal to us that there is a problem. Do you think you could harness your anger and use it as a force of conviction and as an aid to make changes that will bring peace into your life? Can you see that making changes to yourself and turning yourself into a pretzel to try to not provoke the abuser does not solve the problem, but that using anger to fuel your belief in yourself can help you make a plan and to make your own life better? I love this because a lot of people, kind of from what I've noticed, really struggle with anger. And it kind of goes one of two ways. There's either that anger, they feel so much rage that they don't know how to handle it, or they feel completely numb and like disconnected from their anger. Sort of like, well, I'm not really sure if I'm justified in my anger, because, and maybe in their mind they're like, well, I've been through worse, or they're trying to still kind of process and make sense of what happened. And so anger is a really, I think, difficult emotion that a lot of people struggle with. Lucy, let me unmute you. What is your experience with that been, and kind of what is your take on that?
Well, I definitely had to go through a period of rage because I was a number. I was one of the ones that just went numb to everything because there was just too much of it to deal with. And I didn't even realize that I was angry. I had no idea. And it took a lot of work and a lot of therapy. But I'm also, I think a lot of women, especially older women like myself, are conditioned to believe that anger is wrong. You know, it's wrong to feel anger. It's not a ladylike emotion. And so that kind of played into it too. But, and then finally I had a fear. I was terrified of what I would do if I allowed myself to feel all the anger that apparently was buried within me. And it was kind of amazing. I really didn't do anything horrible. I mean, I would get after the weeds or get a shovel and dig holes in the ground or work it off, but I didn't hurt anybody. It was amazing. I let the anger out. I was furious and I let it roll through me and I felt it, but I didn't do anything wrong. I didn't hurt anyone. So it was a really good experience to find it and then harness it. I got a new sprinkler system put in with all those holes I dug. But anyway, it was a good experience to stop being numb like that and to feel free and more honest.
Yes. Okay, I'm gonna mute you again here. Yes, for me, when I went through this, I had never been so angry in my whole entire life. And I did a video about this a long time ago about how I dealt with the rage. And I remember thinking, you know, you watch these shows like Snapped, or you hear these stories where somebody they flip and they murder their spouse or their significant other, and I never understood that before. I'm like, why wouldn't they just leave? Like, I just didn't get that until I went through this, and I thought, I get it. Like, I totally get it. And I'm not a violent person. I'm normally a pretty, like, even keel emotional person. And I had so much rage going through me that it scared me. And what helped me, like you were saying, you know, trying to take that energy and put it into something positive and something physical, I think helps too, to really kind of burn off that energy. I just kept telling myself, I got a mantra, and focused on, and my mantra was, you know, the best revenge is a good life. And whenever I would feel that rage start to surface, because it was too much, like I couldn't even like sit with it and try to process it. Like, it was just so overwhelming. And so I would tell myself the best revenge is a good life, and then I would pour that energy into anything and everything. If that meant cleaning out my car, if that meant organizing a junk drawer, if that meant going through my closet, if that meant, you know, doing my nails, going for a run, something, anything to just kind of try to harness that energy into something positive, because I knew, I'm like, this level of anger and rage is how people become bitter and jaded and angry and hate the world. And I knew that I didn't want to become that person. But it's I think it's scary for a while for a lot of people when they start getting in touch with that anger, and it's like walking a tightrope of, this could kind of go either way, and I really need to get in front of this before this anger completely consumes me. And the other thing too with anger is, for a lot of people, you know, and again, I think this is women especially, because anger is one of those emotions that, it's like you're saying, it's not really socially acceptable. We're not really taught how to handle anger, and it's definitely seen as something that is not appropriate. Whereas men, I think, and again, this is just kind of broad brush describing these emotions here, but I think men really struggle with showing sadness and showing vulnerability and saying, this is what I went through, and opening up about it. So it's two very different, oftentimes two very different struggles at two opposite ends of the spectrum. And the good thing with anger is that there's energy in it, versus like numbness or depression, when there's just, I mean, that to me is like, you're just, a person's just sinking into like the swamps of sadness, and it's really hard for a person to get that momentum to get up and do anything. So that can kind of be the gift of anger, in that of, there's so much power in this, and a person can really radically change their lives if they can start trying to harness that anger and make it work for them, and to propel them to the next level, instead of, you know, like lashing out and hurting other people or hurting themselves with it. But it's definitely very difficult. Let's see what some people are saying here in the chat. Yeah, Bittersweet is saying, as soon as he left the house, I would start cleaning to keep busy. And X2Y2 is saying, anger needs an outlet. The Truth Hurts says, yeah, red flag number 107. You have the right to be upset at your narcissist. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. People really do. And, you know, a lot of these emotions too, even starting at a young age, it's just weird. I think we're just at a kind of a turning point in society where these kids aren't taught this stuff, right? Like, kids are not taught that it's really okay to have any other emotion except to kind of be happy or be content and go with the flow. And so I think it's important to be able to talk to children about that and say, yes, okay, this is, you're sad, you know, or you're angry, or this is what's going on, and this is a normal reaction to a normal, this is a normal reaction to an abnormal situation. Like, it's appropriate that you feel sad right now, or it's appropriate that you feel angry right now, and coming up with some ideas of, okay, how can we work through these emotions, and helping children to understand their different emotions, and help them to process this stuff as best as they possibly can. Because it's one thing for us to go through these relationships as adults, but when you've got children that are also going through that, they're equally as confused, and they're going through it too, but they really don't have the you know, the insight or the life experience or the perspective to handle a lot of this stuff. And Helene says, yes, it's crazy making though, because he remained so calm and collected in the final discard, so he made me feel so irrational and insane for lashing out and being angry at the situation. Yes. And Alcudia, babe, says, or they want you to apologize. Yes. That's a lot of it, where, especially if you've got a narcissistic person, and I mean family member, parent, sibling, significant other, you name it, where they get their kicks off of provoking an emotion to the point where their target explodes. And then they do sit back being so cool, calm, and collected, making it seem like, well, you know, this is really a shame that you feel this way, or they're so calm that it's just absolutely infuriating because they're saying things, they're intentionally trying to provoke this emotion. So they're being completely illogical and irrational. They're not seeing their part in it. And of course, if we don't realize that they're not trying to be solutions oriented, like it takes a while, right, for us to realize they're trying, this is what they're trying to do. Like, they're trying to stir things up. They're trying to provoke a reaction. And they're not trying to work towards a solution. So it's so important for us to realize that's what's really going on here. And so once we can see that this is a game, it's basically, you know, how can I get my target to explode? Then it's a lot easier to just disengage and be like, I'm not going to play. Like, I'm not playing this game of let's just make Dana crazy, right? Or let's make, you know, the target explode or whatever. Like, it's not a fun game. Yes, Helene says, he ended it out of the blue and acted like it was no big deal. Just crazy. After verbally and emotionally abusing me for years. Yeah. X2Y2 says, and that's why no contact is the only way. It really does help if you can start cutting off those people that, if they don't bring value to your life, right? Like if it's not empowering, if it's not enhancing, if it's a one-way dynamic where all of your time and energy and love and money is just going out the door into this black hole of a person, that's a why? Do you know what I mean? Like that's there is no mutuality there. There really is no relationship there. This is us being used and abused and exploited. And unfortunately, it just takes a while for a person to really truly see that is what's going on. Yeah. Okay, so let's see. The next question is, the more we justify any form of abuse, rationalize it, minimize it, or attribute it to anything other than the abuser, we fail to support the victims who actually need our compassion and empathy. We cannot expect change in any society where an abuser is not held accountable for his or her actions. We cannot change society, but at the same time, we are a part of society. And if we change ourselves and provide support and encouragement to other victims, then we are changing society one heart and one mind at a time. And sometimes holding an abuser accountable is as simple as refusing them entry into our homes or our lives. It is exercising a consequence to their behavior. We cannot control the abuser's actions, but we can deny them entry. We can draw a line in the sand and say, if only to ourselves, if you choose to act that way, then you may not be a part of my life. Can you see yourself saying nothing justifies abuse and believing it, and then refusing entry in your life to a committed abuser? I like that. Let me unmute you here, Lucy. Okay.
Okay. Well, I've had a lot of experience with that, and most of it is in the past, thankfully. But there's a lot of things that you have to work through to get to that point, and sorting through who's responsible, because I think a lot of times we tend to think, well, we we must be playing a part in this, or we must have some responsibility in this. And it just takes a long time to work through all of that and try different things. But then when we get to the end and nothing has worked, then we do have to close that door and say, I'm sorry, you can't come here anymore because you can't stop treating me in an unfair and unjust manner. And I don't know, sometimes it feels like people want to be fence sitters. That's what I call them. They don't really want to call abuse abuse.
Mm-hmm.
They have a hard time, or they'll make excuses as well, or rationalize it. But then knowing you've gone through that yourself, that same rationalization, justification, excusing, apologizing, it makes it somewhat understandable. But at some point, I think we've got to say, no, that's abuse, and you've got to walk away from it.
Yes.
Close the door. But I like the way you put it. Nail it shut.
Yeah. Yeah. Let me mute the audio here. Yes. I agree. You know, I think it's one thing because we have been on both sides of that, like you were saying, where we most of us have gone through that, where we've minimized the behavior, we've made justifications for it, we've made allowances for it, and then once we truly got to the point where we're like, okay, you know what, I see this crystal clear for what it is now. It's abuse, and it's not due to drugs, it's not due to alcohol, it's not due to stress, it's not due to they have a new baby in the house, like it's not due to anything other than they have an abusive personality. And truly seeing that for what it is, I struggle with this at work because I have patients that some of them, you know, are in an abusive relationship, and hearing justifications from other people, and I try to remind myself of where if you've never been through it, you just don't get it. And trying to stay calm enough for it to be like a teachable moment, and to be like, well, you know, okay, but he wasn't, you know, he or she didn't do that just because they had a hard day at work, or because they're mentally ill, or because, you know, they're an alcoholic. It's because they're abusive. And so it's really important. And I have heard a couple of you know, other like euphemisms for abuse, like, and I even kind of tap dance around this term too, but and I'll go into that here in a second, but I've heard people call it, oh, this person's really becoming verbally aggressive. You know, things like are physically aggressive. There's just, and I think there can be some pros and cons to that, because if a person is in an abusive relationship, abuse is such a loaded word, and for a lot of people it really does almost repel them, where they're like, well, I don't know if I'd go that far. Like this person, they may scream and name call and, you know, put me down and say all these things, but I don't know if I'd say it's abuse. I mean, after all, they're not hitting me. Or even if they are being hit, well, but I don't have any like bruises. Or, well, I hit them back. So I'm not like totally innocent in this, and there's just all of these excuses where the problematic behavior, the abusive behavior kind of gets minimized, and then it just gets kind of brushed under the rug. And I think especially in families where people really chalk it up to, because, and we know this, right? So like in families where it's sort of like, okay, well, yeah, but that's just mom, or that's just dad, or that's just, so-and-so. This is just how they are. You need to have some sort of compassion because they had a bad childhood, and because nobody wants to deny them entry, right? Like nobody wants to say, to cut off their contact with their parent. I mean, that's a really hard thing for a lot of people to do. And then even if they do get to that point, there's all of these like social misunderstandings about that of, oh, well, you need to forgive and forget, and oh, they're your parent, or they're your family member, and How can you do this? And you're really going to regret this, and so on and so on. And so it's just this added layer of isolation and re-victimization a person's going through because society has their own idea of what abusive behavior is and who can be abused and who can be abusive. And so it's a very, it's a very difficult dynamic to get out of, I think, on any level. And there's just added challenges at any level with that. But I'm to the point in my life where it sounds like you are too, Lucy, where it's like, you know what, I don't drama and dysfunction. I'm done. Like, I'm done with that. I'm done with crazy making. I'm done with controlling behavior. I'm done with people that don't respect my boundaries. If I even get a whiff of like chronic negativity or toxicity of any degree, I'm done. Like, I distance myself because I've danced this dance. I'm almost 40, and it's like, you know what? I've done this. I've done this for many, many years now, and I'm done. And people, I think there's so much freedom that can come from when a person is done. And then they realize, okay, this is probably going to also mean that I have to cut off contact with these other people as well, these other friends or these other family members that just don't get it and they don't respect my boundary. And I think the healthier a person gets, the more insane the whole dynamic becomes. And you just realize, like, I don't even care. Like, okay, they don't get it, that's fine. They don't need to get it. But I'm still going to do what I need to do to hold my boundary. On the flip side of that, one thing I've noticed in my own family is, I have some family members that are abusive, and other family members that go back, we've all been there, like they go back and forth with wanting to leave, but then getting sucked back in. And for the rest of the family, I think for me especially, it's sort of like, okay, I'm going to support you 100%. I'm going to do what I need to do to distance myself because I don't want this other person, wrecking my family, my vacation, or my holiday. So if that means that they're going to be there, I'm probably going to be there to eat. And then I'm going to leave. Like, I'm not going to hang out and be subjected to their behavior. But I think when it's a family member that's trying to leave an abusive relationship with another family member and kind of doing that dance of like, I can't really deny this other person entry, but as soon as that family member says, you know what, I'm done, like I'm getting a divorce, then for me it's important for them to have my full support and be like, I back you 100%. I don't know. It goes back to, I think, seeing the two sides of an abusive person. Because I think a person has to live it for a certain period of time to really, really see it. Because it is so easy to justify what we're experiencing. Now let me unmute you.
Yeah, I agree. I don't regret the time I spent being certain, even though it was extremely, extremely painful to stay and cost me a lot emotionally. It gives me a peace of mind now that I don't really ever have second thought. I know I gave all I had to give, and that was important to me. That was an individual choice to hang in there and try everything I could possibly think of before I threw in the towel.
Did you have, let me see, is there that feedback still? Yes, there is. Okay, let me mute you real quick, and then I'm going to ask you a question. Did you have was there like one aha moment that just made things crystal clear and you're like, that was the clarity that I needed? Or was it a series of moments? Let me unmute you.
There was a what do we call that, last straw moment with one person difficult person. But as I distanced myself from him, other relationships also began to unravel. It was definitely that coming out of the fog, waking up and seeing how prevalent it really was, and how deep into this I had really gotten, partially just by being born into this family. But some of it was external as well, friends, just friends. So yeah, there's a lot that you put up with and go through to be certain before you make that decision. So
wait. I accidentally muted you. Go ahead.
That's okay. I understand when people say that they go back 7 times, that's the average time. It makes total sense to me, because you don't want to be right.
Yeah.
You don't. You don't want to end the relationship. So I understand it. I have a lot of compassion for it.
Yeah. Let me mute this again. What advice would you give to somebody that's seeking clarity and all this? Like, knowing what you know now, what kind of clarity, what would have helped you back then?
I tell them the first thing that my therapist saw, the first meeting I had with her, and she said, I am going to teach you to trust your gut. I think that's been critical, because, I mean, I was stuffing cotton balls in its mouth and telling it to shut up, and what is that small, tiny voice, and I have a brain, and I can figure this stuff out. I mean, you know, you do anything, and she just cut right through it. I'm going to teach you to trust your gut. And that was probably the most helpful thing, is to start trying to listen to what was really being said inside of myself.
Yes. And what were some of the ways that she was able to help you learn to trust your gut? Like, what were some of the aha moments that you had surrounding that?
She's still my crutch. I'm still seeing her on a regular basis.
Okay.
But for me, it was just the talking, and I had to go through a lot, all the way back to childhood, and work things through with her, and have her validate that that was wrong, and no, that wasn't right, and no, that shouldn't have happened, and yes, that was terrible, and no, that's not healthy, and no, that's not normal. I mean, it was having her repeatedly validate my take, my experience, and I can hear it a lot better now. My gut, my instinct. So
yeah, that makes total sense, because when we have an emotional manipulator in our life who's basically actively working against us, that whole relationship, and we're being led to believe, you know, what's up is down and what's down is up, and, you know, what's problematic behavior is normal or reasonable, and what's reasonable behavior is problematic, then it really, it takes a while to figure out what is going on. Is it me? Is it them? Am I too sensitive? Can I just not take a joke? Am I, you know, what's my part in things? Am I driving away this person? Or am I making them behave this way? You know, what do I have control over? And it can be really difficult to untangle. So I love that. I got goosebumps when you said that she was helping. She said, I'm going to help you learn to trust your gut again. Because I think that's That's the big piece in this, and the big gift, I think, in this is reconnecting with who we really are as individuals, and just kind of even as a human being with our own intuition is powerful stuff. So, okay, I love that. Doris says, we are cracked but not broken. Yes. Yes. Okay, let me skip down to the next question here. I love this one. Okay, we do not fall for the narcissist. We fall for the person they pretend to be. There are many survivors who are able to quickly run in the other direction when they interact with overt narcissists. But the problem is that there are many covert narcissists, sociopaths, and psychopaths who manipulate and deceive people very well, deceiving even the most intelligent and competent of mental health professionals. Does this help you with self-forgiveness? Can you feel compassion for yourself if you realize that you were deliberately and intentionally deceived about someone's true character? Does it help you to know that someone has spent years perfecting their image and that it's not your fault if you bought into it? Please try to realize that if somebody else deliberately lies to you about who they are, it has nothing to do with you. It is their problem and their issue. You are not to blame and you are not stupid. If someone hides their true character and nature from you and does it well, then it is not your fault. You had no part in forcing them to do this. It was their choice to do it, and it was done intentionally to deceive you, to steal from you, to take from you, and to con you. How does that make you feel to know that you are not in any way responsible for what they chose to do? That is really powerful stuff, because I think so many of us, it's very common for a person to really struggle with feelings of shame and embarrassment and guilt and remorse, and it took me a while to realize what that phrase even meant. Like, what does that mean to forgive yourself? And years, it took me years to really fully understand what that meant. And I realized actually fairly recently that it meant to not own my stuff, to release the anger I had towards myself at not seeing the situation clearly. I was coming from a background where I was working in a domestic violence shelter, and I was teaching the signs of overtly problematic behavior. And I really thought if anybody should have seen this coming, it should have been me. And so why didn't I? What was I missing? And there was so much shame and embarrassment that here I was, I'd gotten tangled up in this Lifetime TV movie situation, and it rattled me on so many different levels. Personally, and it wasn't really even a conscious thing. It was more of that hypervigilance and that questioning of who else has an agenda, and who can I really trust. And obviously I'm missing red flags here, so something's off within me, and then it spilled over into I don't even know if I can trust myself to keep myself safe. And then professionally thinking I obviously I don't know what I'm doing. I'm kind of leading all of these people. I'm only teaching half the red flags. I mean, that was such a huge aha moment. There's this bug in here. There's this huge aha moment for me of, oh my God. And just that wave of awareness into more of the covert behavior of it, because I think, so many of us, for sure me, was going through life thinking, if we treat people in a fair and just way, they'll be the same. And that people are all inherently good. And I just didn't realize how truly off I was about that. So forgiving myself took many, many years to really realize, what, I did the best I could with the information that I had at the time, and the person that I fell in love with was a lie. They are a master manipulator. They are an amazing actor, and most people would fall for that. And hindsight's always 2020. It's always 2020. We can always look back at something and say, you know what? It was this, this, and this that was off. And to be kind and compassionate towards ourselves and realize everybody does that. And it doesn't mean that you're stupid or that there's something wrong with a person. It's most normal, decent people don't go through life in a state of hypervigilance wondering what agenda another person has. It's not until we encounter somebody that is an emotional con artist that it really rattles us and we realize, oh, wow, okay, this exists. I mean, it's sort of like finding out that zombies really exist. I mean, it can be terrifying, and it's just very, very eye-opening. And unfortunately, it's sort of like nobody else really understands it unless they've been through it. So there was, I think too, for me, forgiving myself, there was a lot of that guilt and shame because it was so covert. I didn't have bruises or broken bones or something concrete to point to and say, see, this is what happened to me. And so I felt like everybody else had really minimized what I went through, and they were treating it like a bad breakup, and which was its own level of re-victimization and isolation. Just feeling like nobody gets me. I don't know why I feel this way. It must not be valid to feel this way. And just feeling so incredibly alone and confused by what I was experiencing and all of the resulting like hypervigilance and trouble trusting people, which went on for years because I didn't know there was nobody there to validate me, to say how you feel is a very normal response to what you went through. I so desperately needed that, and I wasn't getting that. And I mean, thank goodness for the internet and for open conversations like this, where people can get that validation of it's not you. Like this happens to a lot of people, and it's one of those things. Like once we realize that people are out there, then we can be more aware of it. But even then, like they're master manipulators, and it kind of goes back to what you were saying about trusting our gut and paying attention to the signs and realizing that we deserve to be treated with value and respect. And if that starts getting kind of wonky, then that's a sign that we need to really back things up a little bit, and if not, totally just cut bait and drive on. So, okay, Lucy, let me unmute you and I'd like to know what you have to say about this.
Oh, I think it's really hard to not sit around and call yourself stupid, like you say, in hindsight. I mean, it does become clearer, and especially if you're with someone who's very, very good at concealing. As you've gathered and I've mentioned, I come from a dysfunctional and abusive family, but I was with someone who treated me like I walked on water and left a cloud of dust for 17 years. And when I found out that everything he'd ever told me was a lie, that I'd lived with a person part of the time who never, ever told me the truth. I mean, it made even the things that he told me about myself suspect.
Yeah.
Because he spent an awful lot of time building me up and telling me how smart I was, how intelligent, how admirable. We used to joke we had a mutual admiration society. So when I found out that all the things he told me about what college he went to and how he was a baseball star and how he went into the Navy and then was in special forces and then went into a police department and then finally moved on to another government job, which is where I met him, at that government job. I believed him. I believed everything he ever told me. But then when you find out none of that stuff was true, it makes your whole 17 years a waste. You feel like it was wasted, and you feel stupid. You feel like an idiot for falling for it. And it just takes a long time to forgive yourself for something like that. Because even now, just every once in a while, it feels like a lava lamp bubble just comes up into my brain sometimes of things that were said between us that felt a little bit off. And now I can go, oh my God, I see it now, but I couldn't see it at the time. Because there wasn't any overt abuse. There wasn't but I was being manipulated through lies.
Yes.
But I didn't know they were lies. So it was very crazy making. Very. Extremely. And like you said, very isolating when you tell your friends, hey, this guy's been lying to me for 17 years, and they go, well, that's not so bad.
Yeah.
And you feel like a bomb just dropped on the house. Because it did. It blew up your life. Your life didn't exist. Nothing was real.
Yeah.
So it takes a long time to sort all that out and to have some compassion for yourself. But it's great that I get the insights still, even now. Like I said, that bubbling up where it just comes into my head. And then I understand what I should pay attention to, even in a perfect relationship.
Yes. So, what was the moment when you realized that? How did you realize that everything was a lie? Let me unmute you again.
It was kind of amazing. I had actually been broken up from this person for a year. And it was because I wanted to marry, and they didn't. And that was I said, I've waited long enough, I'm moving on, no matter what. Even if you are the greatest thing since sliced bread, I'm moving on. And I'd broken up with them, and I was just driving down the road one day, and all of a sudden I remembered something he said when I retired, when he gave a speech, and he talked about knowing me and meeting me in 1980. And I was like, what? When I realized that, just driving down the road, I said, no, I met him in 85. And then I found out that made me start doubting and questioning and looking into everything, because all of these things he had done, the 4-year college, the 2 years in the Navy, the 2 years with the police department, that's 8 years of stuff. But if you met me in 1980, there's only a 3-year gap between the time he graduated high school and the time he started working with me at the same location with the same government job. And I just started checking out all of his stories, rode off to the military, requested a DD 214, contacted the school, asked for enrollment and or graduation, contacted the police department's HR department, checked it all out. Nobody ever heard of him. So yeah, it was after the fact. But I'd already made the decision to move on. But it still blew up the world.
Oh, completely. Let me mute you. Yeah, that was very similar to my situation with Jack. He was absolutely Prince Charming the whole time. There were, hindsight being what it is, there were little digs here and there, but nothing compared to some of the stuff that I've experienced before, or even since, from other people, like with the covert, like, grinding down of, like, a lot of the emotional and verbal abuse that people go through, or that's out there, I should say. With Jack, he was everything that I needed, and it was very same. He had said that he was in the German military for a couple years. I think that was a complete lie. He said he was in a top secret unit, and my ex-husband was military. He also had a security clearance, so this wasn't like a huge stretch for me to believe this, because that was kind of, that had been my world for a long time. And just like you said, these little bubbles surface, and you're like, oh, like I bet that wasn't true either. And the picking apart of everything when those things do surface, and the realization of, and I bet that was a lie, and I bet that was a lie, and because for me, I just happened to stumble across Jack's double life, and thankfully I found his ex-wife on Facebook. I messaged her, and I said, can you please just talk to me? I just don't, like my whole world's blown apart. Like, I don't even know what to think right now. And she was gracious enough to talk to me, and had a very, like, almost identical story. They had married, and she's like, I feel like he was living. She's like, I feel like he married me for money. She caught him cheating pretty much right away. He promised he'd stop. He said he had a sex addiction, but that he was just, a voyeur. It never went anywhere. He just liked the attention, blah, blah, blah. And it kept happening. She kept finding, profiles on dating sites. And finally, they were only like 3 months in or so to being married. And he'd said he'd gotten fired from his job, like pretty much right away, and was living off of her. And she said at that point she realized that this guy was just not who she thought, and so she came home and said, I'm done. And he had the nerve to flip out, and he threw a bunch of her stuff out in the yard. It was her house, her stuff. He was the one cheating. He was the one living a double life. And so, of course, when I had met him, he had told me that, she had cheated on him. He's, of course, spun everything around. She had cheated on him. He was this victim. He would never, ever do this to anybody. And that he was just this great guy who had been dealt this hand of, problematic experiences in his life. And I believed him, because he just, all of the behaviors seemed to really line up. I mean, he was the kind of guy who would, he shoveled people's driveway. Our neighbors, we had lived in the middle of nowhere, and we had a plow truck that we'd borrowed from a friend, and he would plow everybody's driveway, and he would just, very nice guy, always in a good mood. And I just did not see it coming at all. Yeah. I mean, interestingly enough, though, my mom and I were talking about him over, I don't even know how it came up, because I don't really think about him too much these days, and I definitely don't really talk about him unless it's here and it's to be used as a case study. But my mom had made the comment. She said, when I first met him, she's like, I felt like he was evil. And my mom doesn't normally talk like that, so that was some really strong words for her to use, and I would agree completely. I fully think that he had every intention of killing me. And there's a lot more to my story, and I'll have to do another video about all that, but and that really rattled me too, because it's like, I know how I was feeling towards the tail end. He made all of the meals. He brought me coffee in bed every single morning, and I was going to finance this business for us. And, we had a business plan. We were meeting with banks. We had talked to my father about it. And when everything came crashing down, and I truly saw, like, his true lack of regard. He was using my pet name for him as his screen name on these different dating sites. Like, that was my moment of, oh, this guy really doesn't care. Like, that was such a low to me. It just truly showed he does not care at all. And so, and I kept thinking, like, am I crazy to think that, like, I just felt crazy. I'm like, is it crazy to think that he might have been trying to poison me or drug me? And I fumbled around in the dark with that for years. And I don't have it handy, but I came across a picture that he drew a couple years ago, he used to draw. We lived off the grid. We had this real kind of extreme lifestyle, and so we read a lot because we didn't have electricity, we didn't have TV and these kinds of things. And I was sitting by, we had these gas, literally gas lights. We had gas lights in our house. They were propane lighting, and so I was sitting by one of the lamps and I was reading a book, and had drawn this picture of me reading a book, and in the corner was a picture of a snake that had, with the image of the snake had swallowed a person. And in the shadow of the snake, so you could see like the lumps in the snake, in the shadow of the snake was a heart. And excuse me, when and I came across that probably about 2 years ago, and it almost felt like kind of like almost a gift from God, because it was the validation that I needed, that I wasn't crazy to think that, because normal people don't draw pictures like that. And it's so weird because I don't save stuff for the most part, and I've moved so much that so much has gotten lost or donated or thrown out or given away. And that one drawing just happened to be tucked inside of, like, I don't even know, another book or something that was in my memory chest. And I'm just so outrageously grateful that that was there, because it just made me realize, like, no, this very well could have been going on. But it's so crazy making when you start, you've like you said, like, you look back on that time you spent with that person, and you just see everything totally different, and you're like, you have to piece together your reality of that time. Like, it's so much more than him lying. It's realizing that you were caught up in a massive manipulation for a long period of time, and that is so unnerving and rattling for another person, especially when you realize that you've been sharing a bed with a person who truly doesn't care if you live or die. Like, there's no empathy, there's no remorse. Not only is there no love, like, I remember thinking that with Jack when I came across his pet name. I was like, oh no, this guy, not only does he not love me, he doesn't even like me. Like, they're so deeply disturbed that they truly just use people and go from person to person. And it really took me a long time to fully wrap my mind around that. Have you seen, and it might be kind of triggering, so for you, but it's, in a way, it's kind of validating too. There's a movie called How Stella Got Her Groove Back. Have you seen that? No? It's a true story of the author who meets a guy. She is divorced from an overt narcissist who's just a real piece of work. And then she goes on vacation in Jamaica and meets a guy half her age who's Prince Charming, sweeps her off her feet, whirlwind romance happens. Friends and family are very concerned, but he's so charming, he's so perfect that they grow to love him. They get married right away, and then the movie kind of ends. Sort of like happily ever after, Stella gets her groove back through love, right? Well, fast forward 7 or 8 years, the true story is that then the guy came out that he was gay, announces to her that he's gay, and files for divorce, and then wants to take her to court for like an obscene amount of money. And there's a whole talk with her on Oprah, and she obviously is very angry and very upset, and the guy is on there saying, no, I really loved you, and it's not even about that. And I just remember thinking, like, no, this was planned from day one. He saw her as a wealthy tourist. He targeted her. This was a total con job from the get-go. And to this day, I don't even know, I highly doubt she even realizes what she walked into. Because at the end of her interview, I think it was at the end of the interview with Oprah, there was a 2-part interview. She said, he was so good to her that he was the standard that she would measure all other men. And when she said that, I was like, oh my gosh, no, because he was, in his mind, he was earning every dime that he was planning on taking from her. Like Jack was the same way. And I think in his mind, it was he was earning it. So he would feel totally justified in whatever he had planned. It's diabolical. Let me unmute you here. Okay, yeah.
Well, I have to ask, did Stella's wonderful Jamaican guy start out with a sob story? Because that is something that they do usually come to you with. Just like you said, yours started out with a sob story, except he reversed the situation where it was things he was doing. He said it was done to him. Well, my story too just started out with a sob story of the man's wife was gay, and that she used him as an experiment to see if she could go straight. It was just horrifying to me to think of him being used that way, because he was like yours, the person that shovels the driveways for the neighbors and the hero, you know. So I think that is definitely a red flag, that sob story, because it hooks you in.
Yeah.
So I bet Stella's guy had a sob story too.
Well, in the movie, he didn't, but it was 100% love bombing. This is what I'm saying. It's a really good movie, I think, to watch, to see a lot of these red flags in motion, because you can see the love bombing, the whirlwind romance, the rushing of intimacy, the confusion on her end. Because the whole movie, she's like, I am old enough to be your mother, you know, and he's just so insistent. No, you are the one for me. Like, I love you so much. And, you know, kind of, Stella, why do you doubt me? Right? Like, what, basically kind of spinning it back on her. Like, you have issues with men and with commitment and with trust, but I just love you so completely and so fully, even though I've only known you for 4 days. Right? So the speed at which they moved, and then in the movie, he has her meet his parents, and of course they're not thrilled about this because the age difference is huge. But you know, if he is, and the thing is, if you see him on Oprah, this guy is very effeminate and pretty, like, you see him talk, you see his man, and maybe he's more, you know, kind of effeminate now that he's out. I don't know, but to me, like, his mannerisms, everything would be it's pretty obvious, like, red flag. So I don't know, maybe he was, I'm sure he was gay then, right? But gay then, and then it wasn't, so trying to kind of prove to his parents, no, I'm straight, I'm sure that probably had something to do with it, but it's an interesting movie to kind of see, just to see his level of immaturity and the way everything, in the emotional con artistry behind it. Sex was a big weapon for him, and so there's like a lot of, you know, this mistaking this level of intensity for sincerity in the movie, and how he just charmed her basically into thinking that she'd met her ideal partner. So okay, let me skip to the next question here. I like this question. Okay. Self-care, self-love, and success are in fact the best revenge. Take it from someone who's been there. True revenge, the type that enables you to move forward and use your experiences as fuel to achieve your big dreams, is one of the most satisfying things you can experience in your life. A narcissist's true nightmare is a survivor who is able to transcend the abuse and use it to empower himself or herself. That is the type of revenge that lasts a lifetime. Do you see glimmers of possibility about how to do this? To take your experience and use it for your own and for the other's highest and greatest good. that by rejecting the poison, you cling ever more closely to your true self. Can you feel the power that comes from setting the boundary, saying no to the poison, and walking towards a future filled with others who also value honesty, truth, and your dreams, towards people who are like you? We unmute you here. Okay.
Well, I hope that everybody who's watching and who's part of your forum can see that for themselves and how they can take that experience and change it into something that can make your life better. Because there's a lot to learn, and it takes a long time. But once you learn it, you see how you are in charge of your own happiness, and how you really have that power to take care of that and to walk away when things are wrong. When your gut talks to you and tells you there's something wrong with this. So that's really, it takes, like I said, a long time, years, but it definitely is worth the experience, what you learn from it. I love the way you summarize it into the 4 pieces. And the first one is, I'm not going to kill myself over this. And then my favorite, I'm not going to let these people destroy me. And then you move on and graduate into, I'm going to use this for my highest and greatest good. And then others, use it to help others. And that's why I love so much about what you do, because the forum gives us that opportunity to do that sharing and help others in our small way. So
yeah, I think that really is such the power and the beauty of having a community of people that are all moving towards healing. It's amazing how that really can help our own healing. Just saying a kind word and building somebody else up, because we're all at different stages of understanding and healing, and how powerful that can really be to just tell another person, you're not alone, and I get it, and you can get through this, just keep going. And because it can just be such an isolating journey, especially if other people, if they've never been through it, they really have a hard time understanding it. So yeah, people are talking in the chat over here about the love bombing and lies and everything that they've been going through. And their different struggles. Yeah, it's a lot. I mean, but the great thing is too, with the internet, there's 75 people right now that are on this chat, and then there's probably going to be another several thousand that are going to watch it. And just that, it's funny how the validation comes from hearing just like little snippets of somebody else's story, where we think, oh, we're alone in that, and it's like, oh, you realize, no, you're not. Like, you're really not. And this happened to me too, and how that healing can really start. And then, yeah, making that declaration of, I'm not going to let this end my life. I'm not going to let this ruin my life. I'm going to use this for my highest and greatest good, and then I'm going to move forward and use this for the highest and greatest good of others. And that's how I really, truly reclaim my power and control over all of this. So, okay, here's the next question. I really like this. Remember that anyone who has abused you in a relationship does not deserve to be your friend. At the very least, you should maintain no contact for at least 90 days before making a decision to re-engage with anyone who has abused you. According to Time senior science writer Michael Lemonick, the 90-day rule appears most effective regarding addiction to drugs. Thus, it should be applied to the addictive biochemical cocktail that is produced in a relationship with a narcissist. Their behavior will most likely not change, but yours can. History is the best predictor of the future. If this is true, then how could a person who has abused you in an intimate relationship stop abusing you in a friendship? How do you think that they will just stop manipulating if they are just a friend? What process will they use to become trustworthy and dependable? We must harness our feelings and join them with our logic. Together, using our feelings as a springboard and then validating the feelings with our logic, there is a much better chance of making useful and accurate predictions about our future. Can you see how logically a person who has abused you cannot be your friend unless they are willing to undertake concrete and serious action to change? Can you feel the strength that comes from both observing your feelings and validating it with your logic? There's a couple different things in here. So the part in the book where she talks about maintaining contact for at least 90 days, that was real cringeworthy for me, because I thought, oh man, a person that addictive pull, I really believe it takes at least a good year. At least. And even still, like you were mentioned in this question, why on earth would you want to be friends with a person who hurts you? Friends don't hurt other people. And there's no shortage of emotional manipulators out there, even as friends, that can do a ton of damage, and they do the same thing. Like, the only difference is there's not that, kind of emotional cocktail that's there in an intimate relationship, but it's still all of the crazy making and the gaslighting and the projecting and the spinning things around and making it seem like it's your fault, and that they're not really trying to stir the pot, they're not really triangulating, they're not really doing whatever they're doing. And for me, at this point in my life, the more I'd become aware of narcissism and all of the different facets of narcissism, the more it was a lot easier. And I used it as a pointer to behavior, and realizing I just don't even want toxic behavior at all. Like, it doesn't even need to be outright abusive. Like, anything that's crazy making or frustrating or even just not empowering, or that doesn't bring me a sense of like peace and calm, is not worth my time. And there's so many people out there in the world that are good and kind and honest and just decent people that don't bring all of that drama and dysfunction with them. Like, they're just easy to be around. Like, and it's like, why be around anything less? So let me unmute you and let's get your 2 cents on this, Lucy. Okay.
Well, I didn't at the time that I broke up with mine know yet about all the lies, but he did try to pursue a friendship, and at that point in time, the only issue was that he wouldn't marry me, but he still wanted to be friends. But it turned out it wasn't exactly true, because he developed incurable cancer. I mean, he said he had all these things wrong with him.
Yeah.
Because he was still trying to wring the last bit of emotion out of me. I mean, even in the friendship, it was still a game. The whole thing. I'm dying. I'm diabetic. Look at how much weight I'm losing. I have this cancer. I mean, and just the tears that I cry, and the research that I do to try to find a cure for this specific type. I mean, the hours that I spent, and it wasn't true. So, no, I know you can't just be friends with an abuser, because they're still going to manipulate you. I know that.
Yes. And it kind of goes back to, it's their personality. If a person's driven to get and keep power and control over another person, they're like that across the board. So if they've already targeted a person as a source of supply, they're gonna, like you said, they're gonna ride that train as long as they possibly can, and they throw out all of the stops. So even if a person's not calling a person names, even if they're not yelling, even if there's not that, there's still that chronic and never-ending level of manipulation. There is no relationship possible with a person who is dishonest and disrespectful. Like, period, end of story. They will only ever cause a person hurt and heartache. And the sooner that we fully embrace that, and it's hard. I mean, I cut off a friendship with a guy that I knew from high school. And I had two highly manipulative people in my life that were two very good friends of mine that caused me chaos and hurt and heartache for years, but I was never able to pinpoint it, because I was always lost in, like, is it me, is it them, am I being too sensitive, like, you know, because he's saying that his wife is fine with him having friends, and like, we really are friends, and but this feels weird, and like, why does he keep talking about how things, like when we dated in high school, and just, you know, just all of the triangulation and the pot stirring and the snarky little digs at everything having to do with me. And I just finally was like, I'm done. Like, I don't feel this way around other people. Like, it's that particular person. All of our conversations end with me being frustrated, or me going back and trying to analyze things, like, how did things get off track, why do I feel frustrated, why do I feel that I needed to be more clear, like, how did our communication go off track, and then kind of finally realizing after, you know, flipping 20 years, oh, it was because the communication was never designed to stay on the track to begin with. Like, this whole thing was about him using me to feel smug and superior. This guy's a chronic liar and he's highly manipulative. I get it now, and I'm done. And so, but I know a lot of people struggle with that, because they're like, oh, my ex was really charming, or she was really funny, or, you know, had these really great qualities. And it is hard, because a lot of narcissistic people, again, they're emotional con artists. So what a person is seeing, that's the false self. That person that you really like, it's you. Like, they've been able to manufacture, they're like social chameleons, where they've been able to manufacture what a perfect friend would be for you, what a perfect partner would be, whatever you need, they mirror that back. So once we realize that it's our own character traits that were attracted, it's just so weird and seemingly narcissistic within itself, but it's our own good qualities that we're like, oh, that's so nice that this person has this, right? That we're drawn to. Then we can start truly finding those good qualities, appreciating them about ourselves, and then also finding them in sincere ways with other people. Because, again, like, if a person is dishonest and disrespectful and if they're an emotional con artist, like, there is no making that work. Like, an emotional con artist will always be an emotional con artist. And, you know, whenever anybody asks, like, well, how can I try to be friends with my ex? It's like, how do you juggle snakes? You know, like, why would you want to try to juggle snakes? Yeah, it can be fun for a little bit until you get bit, and you will get bit, because they don't care about other people. They care about extracting supply. And in our mind, because we're not emotional con artists, we can't even begin to think like they do. We might think that we can, like, we're like, oh, okay, I can kind of anticipate a little bit, but if you're hanging out, if you're hanging out with if you're hanging out with a con artist of any kind, it's gonna come back to bite a person, and you just don't know. I mean, when I cut things off with Jack, that was one of the phone calls that I made that night, was doing like a credit lockdown. Like, I called all my credit card companies, like, freeze all of my accounts. Like, I don't know, this guy has all my information. I don't even know who he is. And so to fully realize, like, you really don't know, we don't know who these people are. And that what we're seeing is only a mask, and there is no relationship with a mask. It'll only ever be a mask. Yeah, Sarah says, I realized that I was thinking to myself, he's so funny and honest and attentive, and it seems like I've known him for a long time, and oh wait a minute. These qualities are familiar because he's acting like me. Right. And that's exactly what it is. It's that mirroring and that's how a person feels like they've really met their soulmate. But if they start digging deeper, it's like, okay, what do you really have in common? And is it sincere, or is it, oh, this is so weird, now we have all this stuff in common now? Or is it in like a romantic relationship, is it like, oh, actually all we really have in common is that we have a lot of sex, and that's it. Maybe you don't have the same hobbies, you don't like the same kinds of people, you don't really have a whole lot in common other than, in bed. So people are talking about love bombing, and Truth Seeker says, yeah, love bombing is really creepy. Yes, it is. It is really creepy, and it should be creepy because it's not sincere. So to realize, to separate that sincerity, that intensity from sincerity, that a person can, this is how they manipulate, right? It's like saying all of the right things and coming on so strong, and it's that feeling of, wow, I just have met my future spouse, and you've really only talked to them a few times on the phone, or you've only met them once or twice in person. That fast of a connection with another person is a sure sign that we're not seeing things clearly, and it takes time. It takes time to truly know a person, to really see who they are, because everybody's on their best behavior for like the first at least 30 days. And anybody can be anything for 30 days, even for 90 days, even for 17 years. They can really put on like a good act. And so it's so important that we go slow and really learn to trust our gut instinct and to pay attention when things feel off. Helene says, I had that gut instinct since the first date. I just denied it. And he told me I was overreacting and overthinking. Little did I know. That right there too, when another person minimizes how you're feeling, normal people don't do that. So if a person has hesitations about something, it's not normal for a person to say, oh, you're overthinking things, I forget what else you said, you're overthinking, you're making too big of a deal out of this, you're overreacting. That they're trying to convince you. So I was watching a video the other day, somebody had recommended in the group about statement analysis. Lucy, if you've got some time, this stuff is interesting. You would love it. Statement analysis. Look for it on YouTube. And fascinating. And there's a series of videos out there. A guy who analyzes the statements of criminals and looks at the wording that they use. And he had said in one of his videos, he said the difference between people that tell the truth and people that lie is that people that tell the truth, when they're explaining something, that how did he put it? They use their language to convey information. So it tends to be kind of pretty matter of fact about the situation. They're just conveying what happened. If a person's lying or if they're manipulative, they'll try to convince. And so it's a lot of that kind of language of minimizing and spinning, or using a lot of adjectives and adverbs. And little kids are great at this. Like when they really want something, they're throwing out all the stops. Like they're just telling you everything that you possibly would ever want to hear. They're addressing any possible issue you might have with whatever they want in order to convince you to give them something, right? Because if they really want a puppy, they're going to tell you, I'll take it for a walk every day, and I'll bathe it every night, and I will just love that puppy and you'll never have to do anything. And as a parent, right, or as an adult, you're thinking like, I don't think I don't think it's going to go down this way. But they're so insistent, and it's that level of intensity that tends to wear a person down, and we mistake that for sincerity. But really, it's people that are being sincere aren't, they're not intense like that. They're not trying to convince another person of seeing things their way. They're just trying to convey information. So if you guys end up watching videos on statement analysis, let me know, because it's, oh man, it's so eye-opening. Let me go to the next question here. Okay. This is a good one too. Most abusive people do realize when they are stonewalling. They are conscious of when they need to defend themselves from what they perceive to be an attack on their sense of entitlement and false sense of superiority. They feel the need to punish their victims for the perceived attack, even if it's a simple request to talk about the victim's emotions. They gain satisfaction and regain a sense of control when they are able to shut a conversation down and escape accountability for their actions, while also making their victims feel guilty for questioning them in the first place. When a victim goes no contact on an abuser or avoids them after an incident of abuse, this is not the same as stonewalling. Rather, avoiding an abuser is a form of self-protection and care. Can you remember a time when this happened to you? When an abuser simply refused to address your legitimate questions and gave you the silent treatment? Can you see and feel the difference? Can you see that their tactic is a manipulative one? But when you choose to go no contact, it is not to manipulate them, but rather to protect yourself from further injury. I love that. So, stonewalling. I think a lot of people get this confused. Stonewalling, the abusive techniques of stonewalling and silent treatment as compared to going no contact. So let me unmute you, Lucy, if you want to talk a little bit about that.
Well, yeah, I mean, when you first decide to go no contact, there's that whole other layer of guilt that you've got to fight through, because you feel terrible about doing it. You don't want to do it. And I remember, this is one of the clues I had about finding out some of my other family members, where I had made the decision to go no contact with certain family members, and I was told, not asked, but told by another family member that I was doing this to be manipulative, that I had gone no contact because I was trying to control another person. And that's when I realized that they too were narcissistic, because that's what it meant to them. That was their interpretation of it. And it was such a shock.
Yeah.
To think that people were truly using silent treatment to control other people, and that they thought I was doing that same thing, was astounding, jaw-dropping. But I wasn't. I was trying to protect myself from getting hurt anymore. I've had it. No more. You cannot treat me like this and still try to have a relationship. It's not going to work. So it was quite the experience. It took many, many months for me to work through all that. So.
Yeah, it's, I think it's difficult on its own level of crazy making when, especially within a family, where if you're trying to set a boundary and it's not respected, and it's seen as, oh, you're being so manipulative and controlling because you won't let this other person continue to abuse you. It's like, what? Like, I'm sorry. Okay, I guess I'm manipulative and abusive then. So, and controlling, because I'm not going to stick around and be somebody's emotional or verbal punching bag. Like, no, it's not okay with me. And if that's not okay with you, then you can go away too. So I don't need permission, and I'm not going to be treated like this. Not by him, not by her, not by you, not by anybody. I don't care if they're my mother, my father, a priest, my ex-husband, like nobody. Like, I'm done. Done, done, done. So somebody had asked in the chat about what is the difference between stonewalling and silent treatment. So silent treatment is it's a grooming behavior. It's where a narcissistic person cuts off communication, and it's a grooming behavior because it's designed to teach them, to groom them into behaving a certain way. So it's when a person, they stop talking, and the whole message is basically, don't confront me about any issue that you might have about me or about my behavior or how I'm doing things, because if you do, then I'm just not going to talk to you. And then this might go on for hours, for days, for weeks, for months, even for years, and oftentimes the person on the receiving end of the silent treatment, they're feeling like a sheet twisting in the wind, wondering what does this mean? Are we still friends, or are we still together, or are they going to leave me? And that's why it's so abusive, because it's all about getting and keeping power and control over the target. Stonewalling it's similar, except it's basically they might have communication still open, but there's this absolute refusal for them to talk about any particular issue. So it's like arguing with a brick wall. Like, you just can't get them to see any other point of view other than their own. They're not budging at all. Completely inflexible, rigid, fixed approach to things, which is its own level of crazy making, because you just realize, like, they're not going to apologize. They're not going to own up to anything. They're not going to admit their part in this. And that stonewalling is, I think, oftentimes what is also can be used to provoke the person on the receiving end of that, by the abusive person's complete inability to have any accountability for their part in things. So that's the difference between those. And yes, going no contact. So then also within that, no contact is when a person's on the receiving end of abusive behavior and they decide, you know what, I'm cutting off all contact. I'm cutting this person out of my life. I am 100% done. Like, I'm done. This isn't grooming. I'm not trying to get power and control over them. I'm not trying to teach them a lesson. I'm not hoping that they're going to change. I'm just done. I just cut bait, drive on, done. And no contact is a healthy approach to dealing with really toxic, abusive, problematic people. Why can't I talk? Problematic people in our life, and instead of holding on to hope that things can actually be different. So those are the differences there. And it feels, let me also say this too, with no contact, is to other people that haven't really gone through something like this, it can be seen as we're being bitter, we're being petty, we're being immature, we're being manipulative, and they just don't get it. They don't get it because they're not in it. Is really what it boils down to. But the thing is, when you set a boundary for you, other people don't need to be okay with it. They don't get to vote. This is your life. It's not a democracy. So you hold those boundaries and realize other people don't need to be okay with it. They're probably not going to be okay with it, and that's fine. They get to have their opinion, but it's totally healthy and okay for you to not want to be around people that are treating you poorly. Okay, this great question, comment here. Although it may seem counterintuitive, leaving a long-term abusive relationship can actually be harder than leaving a nourishing, supportive, positive one. This is because narcissistic or antisocial abusers are masters of playing mind games and covert manipulation. They're able to deny the abuse through gaslighting and present a false image to the world which supports their denial. Survivors are then subjected to a battle within their own minds about whether the reality they experience is truly abuse, a type of cognitive dissonance that society seems to encourage by victim blaming. If you have had difficulty leaving an abusive relationship, does this statement help you feel some compassion? To understand that you are dealing with an individual who is incapable of relating to you in an open and honest way, and who is using all of their powers to deceive you and convince you that you are imagining things or are to blame for their treatment of you. I like that. And I like how you said it's harder, which you're right, it seems totally counterintuitive that leaving an abusive relationship can be harder than leaving a nourishing, supportive, positive one. And for all of the reasons that you mentioned, the level of manipulation and the level, I think, oftentimes too, the emotional intensity, the highs and lows, the wondering, the trauma bonds that form during that, it can be so hard for a person to walk away from that and wonder, like, what is their part in it, and is this person their soulmate, or is this person Satan, and like what's really going on, and they're just emotionally all over the board and lost in this fog of confusion. And especially if the good times are so good, but then the bad times are so bad, which none of that's normal, and none of that's found in a healthy relationship.
Yeah, so all of the cocktail of chemicals that are being released into your bloodstream, it is addictive, and I've read in several books by several doctors that your body can't tell the difference between when you're feeling the good feelings and the bad feelings. Either way, the same group of chemicals gets released and it's still addictive. Whereas if you're having a breakup with, let's say, a normal person, it's going to be with sadness and remorse and with reflection of what the life that you expected to have and how you've grown apart.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not going to be this, emotional roller coaster, literally, from the chemicals that are coursing through your body that you go through with somebody who's deliberately trying to confuse you on a daily basis. That's just going to make it that much harder. And I really like what Pete Walker says about self-compassion being so, so important. So I hope that everybody really gets that, how important it is to be able to feel sorry for yourself. Not
Yeah.
And to be understanding of it's really not your fault, that there's other things going on that aren't going on in a normal relationship. So it's just really important to be careful of yourself.
I like that. Yeah, that's so true. It's somebody had described a narcissistic relationship once in a YouTube comment as an emotional meat grinder. And I thought, boy, that really, especially when, any type of narcissistic relationship is its own type of meat grinder for sure. And when a person is riding those low lows and those high highs, and it's over and over, and all of the confusion and the messing with your head and just all of it, it just leaves a person so turned inside out emotionally, with like, I don't even know what's up and what's down, and whether this person is problematic or if they're ideal or like what's going on. But yeah, feeling like your life is blown to pieces because of another person's behavior, that's not even in the ballpark of normal. And it's really important for people to realize, like, there doesn't have to be name calling involved. There doesn't have to even be hot, cold. which a lot of people go through, where their partner runs really hot and then really cold, where there'll be their silent treatment, or like the affection or the attention's just turned off. Or, there doesn't have to be physical abuse or any type of like overt abuse. It's, if it's problematic, and if you're feeling like your whole world is blown apart, like that's just normal. People don't cause that amount of devastation in other people's lives. There's still that level of, when you leave a relationship, of treating that other person with dignity and respect. And maybe certain things were said and maybe certain things were done, but there's still that level of that, like, I don't know how we got here. Things need to end. I'm so sorry. I care about you as a human being. We both have to go on and go our separate paths. There's still that level of connection there at the end of the day. Like, there's just not that emotional devastation that's present. Or that complete lack of empathy or remorse. Okay, I like this one. After the ending of an abusive relationship, survivors have the challenge of uncovering their past traumas and the trauma they've just experienced, and begin to work through them. The ending of this relationship is actually a golden opportunity to heal from the wounds that were never healed in the first place. The fear of being left alone with the pain now has to be overcome, and the survivor now has the space and time to independently act, think, and feel outside of the toxic dynamics of the previous relationship. Though it is difficult to see at the time it happens, can you see how ending this abusive relationship in the present can give you an opportunity to heal wounds that go all the way back to childhood, and is an opportunity to become whole and an integrated adult person who will never again settle for an abusive relationship ever again? I love that. So, I guess, Lucy, I don't know how much you're comfortable sharing here on this live stream, but what were some of the connections that you were able to glean from your experience, and how were you able to kind of, what aha moments with your own childhood, and how were you able to move forward and heal those parts? Let me unmute you.
I think, as I mentioned, I'm still in therapy.
Yes.
So it is ongoing.
Yes.
But yeah, and then you mentioned something a little earlier, and I was muted, so I couldn't correct it. But you said that you learned to trust your gut again, except the problem was that in the dysfunctional family that I was raised in, I never learned to trust my gut. It was denied. I had to be the possession of the narcissist. I wasn't an individual. I didn't have any feelings. And they were either beaten or brainwashed out of me. So I didn't even have a gut to go back to. It was still in there, buried deep, but there was no real again, or an experience of something recent. So it was really a complete tearing down of pretty much everything, and rebuilding from scratch. I mean, all the way back as far as I could remember, with the help of my therapist. So, but yeah, I call it reprogramming.
Mm-hmm.
But it's hard, but it can be done. But if you don't do that reprogramming, you're just going to end up in another relationship like that, because a lot of this stuff is subconscious, comes from childhood. And if you don't go back and tear it all apart and mend it, heal it, it'll happen again.
Yeah. Yes, I agree completely. Yes, so what I had said, I agree with you. Like, I had a gut instinct. I don't think I ever fully was anywhere near where I am today with being in tune with it. I think, and for a lot of the same reasons. Like, it's just, oops, my battery is dying on my iPad. But what it really brought to my attention was these unaddressed vulnerabilities that I had. Like, those are my childhood wounds. And kind of in a nutshell, I grew up feeling very unloved and very unimportant. And so it was like pulling a string on a sweater. Like, once, my relationship with Jack, I thought it was a fluke. Then it happened again with Steve. There were, like really going back and realizing, oh my gosh, nope, that was another one, and that was another one, and that was a friendship, and really seeing these people have been in my life in varying capacities forever. I just hadn't realized it because it hadn't gotten to the point where it was so extreme, like so Lifetime TV movie. It was registering as problematic, but not as problematic as those two relationships. And then when I realized that was my vulnerability, and so I was so primed to fall for the love bombing, which they do on a friendship level too, but it's just not with the affection, but it's that let's spend every day together, like we're instant best friends. It's, that's that whirlwind friendship that kicks up. And realizing that was one of the main vulnerabilities that I needed to address within myself and be able to fill that bucket myself and not look outside for other people to make me okay. Like I needed to do that. And that was for me the big gift in all of this, was having those vulnerabilities brought to my awareness. And I think the vast majority of people out there have vulnerabilities. They're just not aware of it. They just know that their life isn't working for them and they don't know why. Okay, let's skip ahead because my battery's gonna die on my iPad here soon. Okay. Let's see. By invalidating the survivor's experience, people are defending an image of themselves that they identify with strength, not realizing that abuse survivors are often the strongest individuals out there. They've been belittled, criticized, demeaned, devalued, and yet they've still survived. The judgmental ones often have little to no life experience regarding these situations, yet they feel quite comfortable silencing the voices of people who've actually been there. While being a survivor can sometimes alienate us from society, it can also give us an intense connection with other survivors and interactions filled with understanding and compassion. We have the ability to offer empathy and insight to others on a level that other individuals aren't even capable of. Survivors on the healing journey learn how to use their voices and connect with alternative communities and reach out to those who have been there. Do you see the strength and the compassion that can come from this experience, and how your naturally occurring giving nature can be used for others' highest and greatest good? Can you see how you are now uniquely trained to support others who are going through the same experience? I love that.
Well, that's from the heart. That's where the question come from, is how reading Shahida's book made me see that that's really true. Because, I mean, you think about somebody who was raised in a normal, quote-unquote, healthy family, they haven't been through some of the things that survivors have been through. So they've had it relatively easy. So it's pretty easy for them to stand up and say, well, I wouldn't put up with that, or that would never happen to me. So it's kind of amazing, especially in the cases where it's kind of been an ongoing cycle where you were trained to accept abuse as normal from the time you, as far back as you can remember, and that you still survived it. It's like, some days I walk around thinking, wow, I'm a miracle. I really am a miracle.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah,
there's a lot to say for us. We are pretty tough.
yes.
Especially if we can still smile.
Yeah, I agree completely. There's a saying in Buddhism that goes, be kind because some people have suffered too much, and be kind because some people haven't suffered enough. And I think that's so profound because with suffering, with pain comes growth. And it's that human suffering that it can help us better to relate to other people such a deep level, because we get it in its own. It's one of those things, it's like you don't get it unless you've been there. And it really is a great way for us to turn our pain into our power, and it connects us to people that I kind of ironically have been looking for our whole life, you know. Because a lot of the survivors out there are a bunch of really, they're just our kind of people, like really great, compassionate, kind, considerate, caring people. And unfortunately, it takes this kind of a situation for us to all meet, but there's a lot of good that can come out of everything, really, in life. This being no exception. So, okay. Her book was full of so many like, great topics. You kind of listed it quite a few here. She talks about different ways of healing, different techniques: meditation, cognitive behavioral therapy, positive affirmations, dialectical behavioral therapy, reverse discourse, Reiki, acupuncture, chakra balancing, healing the inner child, yoga, cord cutting, aromatherapy, nature, music therapy, art therapy. And your question was, have you tried any of these or any combination of these, and what have you found helpful in your healing journey? So for me, yoga, Reiki's been huge. I have gone to several Reiki groups since I started doing this website, and because I really struggled for quite a, I still struggle with it, but I really struggled there for a while with the intense emotional stuff day in and day out, and letting go with that, because it's hard when there's so many people that are in emotional crisis. And there was a lot of benefit. I felt instantly better in many ways after going to like a Reiki session. I don't know if it's causation or correlation, but whatever it was, I felt a lot of peace about that. And they also talked a lot about cord cutting and doing things to like protect yourself energetically by like envisioning like a white light or a white bubble around a person, and keeping out, just as a way to kind of shield your energy in all of this. And so that helped. Therapy, I didn't get a whole lot out of therapy, but I think it was more of the finding the right therapist is like finding the right professional in any field. Sometimes you have to go to a few to really find a good one that really gets you, and a good one can be worth their weight in gold. So dialectical behavior therapy, I've never tried that. I would love to go through that. I think it's one of those things that should be taught in like first grade. So that's my take on it. What have you done, and what worked for you?
Well, I do a lot of journaling. I wish I could put it into something useful like you have, like a book. But because I have 1.5 million words since I started. I write every day. I've written every day for 2.5 years. Really helps me a lot. Just to have it as a reference, as a way to see how I've changed, how I've grown, sorting things out, making sense of things. Journaling is tremendous. And my therapist, I guess I got lucky. Mm-hmm. I just walked in and we hit it off. She understood me. She's a very compassionate person. people always ask, how do you know if you have a good therapist? And I always say, do you feel seen, heard, and understood? Because that's the number one, I think, complaint that we have about relationships with narcissists. They can't see us, they can't hear us, and they don't understand us. So it was really important to me to have somebody who did those. So the journaling, the therapy, nature. I do an awful lot of gardening. Grow a lot of flowers. Just looking at water. Being in water, going swimming. Physical things like that. I'd say those are my main go-tos. And I have taken antidepressants.
Yes, I was also on medication too for a while, and it did help, and I'm glad that I did that. I'm not a huge fan of medication, but I definitely think there's a time and place for it, and if a person, there's no shame in that. I think if a person feels that that's what they need to do, then that's what they need to do. So some people in the chat are saying prayer, journaling. Somebody was saying, reading books on the inner child really helped them. Somebody was saying that they have trouble with journaling because their mother used to read their journal, and so they struggle with writing authentically. Yes, I had a friend read my journal years ago, and I struggle with writing things down. I'm terrified that somebody's going to come across that information again. So I write everything I type. I have an ongoing Word document, and I keep it on my computer. If I do handwrite stuff that I'm scared is going to come across anybody else's radar, I'll either throw it away or burn it. And it's very therapeutic. I think that can be therapeutic in and of itself, is writing stuff out and then burning it. So let's do another question. Oh gosh, there's so many good ones left here. Let's do this one, and then I think we're going to wrap it up and call it a night because my iPad's going to die here. Okay, Shahida offers a great list of 111 ways for us to avoid breaking no contact. What are some ways that you've supported yourself and maintained no contact? Okay, Lucy, let me unmute you here.
Step away from the phone. Just giving yourself lectures sometimes, and distracting yourself. But her list was really comprehensive. She had a couple of lists that I thought were really great. There's one that one thing that wasn't on that list that does work if you can get one. Hug a baby. I spent an awful lot of time with my daughter's newborn when all this was going on. I'd go spend time with her once a week and just take care of the baby and play with her. It helps. It really does. To just be around an innocent, young, growing, learning, happy child. Tremendous therapy.
Yes.
And helps you forget.
Oh, I muted you too quickly. Say it again.
It's okay. It helps you forget about them and go and maintain no contact because you're busy playing with the baby.
Yes. Same thing with pets. I think fur babies too can just be so therapeutic, and getting our mind off of it. For me, what helped the most was to make that list of the reasons why I was going no contact. Because it's amazing the stuff that our brains can gloss over when we're feeling vulnerable, or that cognitive dissonance just sets in like a fog, and remembering like, no, it's really important that you see this person for what they are and don't do it. Like, to remind yourself. When you were saying, I had a funny look on my face just then when you said hug a baby. I was thinking it was like, I didn't realize that you meant like hug a baby. I thought you meant like it was some, I don't even know, like a doll or like a hug a baby. I'm like, what is a hug a baby? So that's why I gave you that strange look. But yes, okay, so let's see. People are talking about different ways that they've gone about healing. Meditation, prayer, crystals, Reiki are all great forms of energy healing. Yeah, I just recently started hearing about crystal in healing. That's been a new thing for me. So if anybody is familiar with that, I'd be curious to know more about that and kind of. I just like know nothing about crystals and healing, so I'd be curious. Yeah, Truth Seeker says babies laughing at dog videos are double cute. Yes, they are. And there are so many just really cute videos out there on YouTube. I think anything that helps us to lift our spirits and realize that even though there is so much darkness and so much heaviness that goes along with this, that at the same time in life there is still so much that is good and right with the world and with people in general and in life in general. There's still so much out there. So okay, I think that's about all we're gonna have time for tonight. We're over 2 hours. So the book for next time, if you go to my website, go to dropping things, calendar of events. On there, you'll see that the book for February is How to Do No Contact Like a Boss by Kim Said. And we're going to work on some questions and get those up here. I'm going to shoot for February 15th at the latest. And then that book club is going to be the last Thursday of the month. I have the date and time, 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we'll go for probably about 2 hours or so on that. And if you want to be a part of the low battery, the live stream book club like that Lucy and I are doing here on Zoom, it's for people that have read the book that really want to be engaged in a discussion. Let me know. You can email me at deardana@thriveafterabuse.com, and we'll see. We can have, I think, up to 50 or so people on this, so we can figure something out, and we'll go from there. So thank you, Lucy, so much for joining me and for your amazing questions. They're so powerful, and I hope that you guys really enjoyed Lucy's questions as well. They were amazing. So thank you, Lucy, and I will see you on the forum tomorrow.
Well, thank you, Dana. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, take care. Have a good
night,
night.
everybody.
Okay. Bye, guys.